When the guns went quiet, the silence felt wrong. It was not peace, only the echo of things lost. For Audie Murphy, the end of the war did not come with the triumphant roar of victory, but with the hollow whisper of men who never made it home. The armistice bells clanged somewhere in the distance, but he couldn't hear them. Not really. He heard gunfire in every clatter of a train wheel, saw smoke in every morning mist. The army sent him home draped in honor, medals, citations, photographs. Reporters wrote his name beside words like valor and heroism, as if those could wash away the screams that clung to him. The Medal of Honor gleamed bright against his uniform when they pinned it to his chest, but it felt heavy, too heavy. To him it was not a badge of courage, but a reminder of the men who burned, who froze, who begged for morphine while he kept firing. They called him America's most decorated soldier. He called himself a survivor, and that was never meant as praise. He stood before cameras that flashed like gunfire, smiling with a stiffness that fooled the crowd but not himself. Senators shook his hand. Hollywood sent invitations. He was 20 years old and already haunted. After the ceremonies, the noise faded. The parades ended. He found himself back in Texas, walking the dirt roads that once felt endless and free. Now they were smaller somehow, shrunken by memory. The fields smelled of dust and rain instead of cordite, but his body didn't know the difference. Each night he woke to the sound of imagined shells, his hand groping for a rifle that wasn't there. Neighbors called him polite but distant. His mother said he'd changed. He didn't argue. Change was too small a word for what the war had done. Then came the letters, studio offers from Los Angeles, producers writing of fame, fortune, and a nation hungry for heroes on screen. At first he ignored them. He didn't want to play a hero. He didn't believe in them anymore. But money was thin, and the army pay had long stopped coming. So, one winter morning, he packed his duffel bag and took a train west, chasing a future that felt unreal. Hollywood greeted him with bright lights and easy lies. They wanted to see the soldier who'd stopped an army, not the boy who woke screaming at shadows. They dressed him in uniforms again, handed him prop rifles, and told him to relive the battles for the camera. And he did, because pretending was easier than remembering. Yet sometimes, between takes, he'd freeze. The lights would blur, the sounds would shift, and suddenly the set was gone, replaced by the fields of Holtzvir, the snow, the fire, the smell of burning oil. He'd blink, and the director would be shouting, "Cut!" while everyone stared. They didn't understand. They couldn't. He acted well enough to fool them all. They said he was born for the screen. They called him disciplined, stoic, mysterious. But when he looked in the mirror, he saw the same hollowed eyes that had stared back at him from the blackened wreck of that tank destroyer. He built a career, brick by uneasy brick, to hell and back, the red badge of courage, stories of men who fought, bled, and rose again. He played them like he was reading his own epitaph. When Universal Pictures asked him to star in a film about himself, he hesitated for days. Then, quietly, he agreed. On the day of filming, he stood in front of a replica of the same tank destroyer he had once climbed in real fire. The set was exact, down to the bullet holes. The crew waited for direction. Murphy stood still for a long time, eyes distant. When the cameras rolled, he didn't act. He just remembered. Every shot, every scream, every collapse was real. When the director yelled, "Cut," no one spoke. Some said they saw tears on his face, though he denied it. Later, the film would make him a national icon. But that night, back in his small apartment, he sat in the dark for hours, the Medal of Honor lying on the table beside him. Its metal caught the faint light, gold against silence. He thought of the men who hadn't returned. He thought of the boy he'd been before the war, barefoot, wild, hungry for meaning. Somewhere between those two lives, something had died that no medal could resurrect. The years went on. He married, raised children, bought land, tried to live quietly. But peace never truly came. The nightmares persisted. Loud noises sent him ducking for cover. Crowded places made him restless. When reporters asked about the war, he answered politely, then changed the subject. When they called him a hero, he smiled faintly and said, "No. The heroes are the ones who didn't come back." By the time he reached his 40s, the war had taken more than half his nights. He began sleeping with a pistol under his pillow, not out of fear of others, but of the memories that stalked him. Still, he kept living, stubbornly, almost defiantly. Then, in May 1971, the sky came for him again. The small private plane carrying Audie Murphy crashed into the side of a mountain in Virginia. The wreckage burned quietly among the pines. He was 45. The newspapers called it tragic. The country mourned the loss of a hero. But perhaps, in that final instant, the man who had fought too long, too hard, finally found rest. And yet even death did not silence the echo of his story. Decades later, veterans still whispered his name with awe and sorrow. His grave at Arlington remains small, modest, almost hidden, like the man himself. The inscription is simple. It does not boast. It only tells the truth. Audie L. Murphy, Texas, Medal of Honor. Beneath that stone, the boy from the farm and the soldier from the war sleep side by side, the dreamer and the ghost. And above them, the wind carries the same quiet refrain it always has. Not every victory is won on the battlefield, and not every hero comes home whole. But for one brief, blinding moment in history, Audie Murphy stood against the tide of war and did not fall.